Hello, everyone, and welcome to Garden Hour tonight. We have just about this garden hour and one more garden hour left before the end of the season. If you have any questions throughout the night, feel free to add them into the chat or the Q&A box. I am so excited to welcome Nick Volesky. He makes his garden hour debut tonight. So welcome, Nick, and if you want to take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Sydney. So I'll go ahead and get my screen shared. Okay, everything looks good. So yeah, I just want to introduce you guys to myself. My name is Nick Volesky. As introduced, I am the new Extension Horticulture and Specialty Crop Field Specialist here with SDSU Extension. I'm based at the West River Research and Extension Center in Rapid City, South Dakota. So just a little bit about myself. I grew up in southwestern Nebraska, and I went to the University of Nebraska, where I got my bachelor's degrees of applied science and horticulture. During that time, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of faculty in the department with extension and research appointments. So I did a lot with agriculture and kind of organic vegetable production. And then after graduating from the University of Nebraska, I went out to Utah State University in Logan, Utah, where I worked with USU Extension for several years in the Integrated Pest Management program. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to do some graduate school and earn my master's in plant science. My research focused on cut flower production, protected cultivation methods, for those different kinds of systems. So a lot of my experience is with IPM and specialty crops, optimizing vegetable and cut flower production and protected cultivation systems. So here's just some photos of me and my work over the years. I came to South Dakota with my wife, Hannah, our two Devon Rex cats, and then our baby that's going to be born in October. So we're excited to be here. We're excited to be South Dakotans and explore this beautiful state. So for garden hour this evening, I'm going to talk to you guys about extending our gardening into the fall season. So fall is really an excellent time to grow many of our vegetable crops. I think growers like to take advantage of the cooler temperatures. So in this presentation, I'm kind of going to talk about how we can extend our gardening into the fall season and keep harvesting produce, especially after those spring and summer crops start to fade. So first thing I want to show you guys is this table that's from the gardening or the vegetable gardening in South Dakota guidebook. So you'll see a lot of the crops listed here. These are mostly cool season crops, which can also be planted in the early spring. Um, and then listed are the planting dates. This is kind of based off the statewide average of when the first frost is, estimated to be about mid-September. And of course, this is really generalized. You want to check your area's own state averages or kind of your area's own average about when that first frost is usually predicted. So mid-September is just kind of representative of the entire state of South Dakota. So obviously we're about right now in mid August. So I just kind of marked in red some of the crops that we could be recommended to plant right now. Um, so the planting dates are based off that. But like I said, check your own local area. So for example, here in Rapid City, the first frost is usually not until later September. So that would buy us about an extra 2 weeks, where other areas farther north might be a lot sooner than mid-September. And then, of course, the planting is based off knowing the crop's day to maturity and then counting back from that first frost. So this table kind of gives a model of kind of the average and range. But of course, when you're planting specific cultivars or looking at seed packets, you can actually read that and it'll give you probably a better indication of the amount of days to maturity. So remember when we're talking about frost, but obviously right now it's still really warm. So when we're planting in July and August, the temperature, air temperature, and soil temperatures are really hot. So when we're planting seedlings or transplanting young plants, there can be a lot of heat stress that occurs during this time. So we really want to make sure that we're providing good irrigation and shade for these different plants. So I do kind of want to talk to you guys too about the difference with frost and freeze. I think gardeners and farmers sometimes we can use the terms interchangeably, but we should really know that they are different. So with frost, that usually refers to when the air temperature is not quite freezing at 32 degrees, but just above that, usually in the mid to late 30s. Different sources might give specific numbers, but typically it's usually within that range. And with frost, we usually see minor superficial damage with our plants. Areas that have a lot more humidity, like out in the eastern part of the state, that humidity can actually kind of slow down the cooling temperatures, but there can also be a higher risk of damage to the plants. Um, Also, sometimes we might see radiative frost. So that can usually form or happen on calm, clear nights where the soil surface, especially exposed bare soil, where that heat can rise and escape, and that can cause that radiative frost, which can be harmful to the plants. Now, freezing occurs when the air temperature is 32 degrees or below. At this point, the cells in the plant, they can freeze, expand, or rupture. And sometimes we go a step farther and call it a hard freeze. And this occurs at 28 degrees or lower. And this can actually kill most of our non-dormant plants. And really, the severity depends on the duration and exposure of these cold temperatures to the plants. So whether it's like 30 minutes of exposure or several hours. So I found this cool figure from this paper credited here where they looked at potato leaf cross section at different temperatures. So this was all done in a lab setting. But here, this is kind of a microscopic image of the parenchyma cells of these leaves. So you can see what's going on here at 41 degrees and then 32 degrees. But when you get down to the 28 degrees, you can see that damage where the freezing occurs and kind of ruptured those cells. So I think this is just kind of a fun, cool figure to explain that. So, when is the risk of cold injury here in South Dakota? Well, um, well, I like these maps. These were modeled by Laura Edwards, our extension climatologist. So basically, we're looking at the 50th percentile or the median date of the first 32 degrees or 28-degree Fahrenheit occurrence throughout the state. So this means about half of the recorded frost has occurred before that date and then about half after. So for example, if we look out here in Rapid City, the first freeze is usually about late September to early October. But if we go to a more warmer area, like down here in the Fort Randall Valley or the Lake Andes area, that's usually not until mid to late October. So I think these maps are really kind of fun and kind of a useful tool to study the regional differences too. And of course, this is just kind of based off that 30-year average from 1991 all the way to 2020. So again, there's still a lot of variability season to season. So it's important to be monitoring the forecast, especially when we start to get to mid and late September. So let's talk a little bit just about plant hardiness. So this table here, this shows the minimum and ideal air and soil temperatures for both cool and warm season crops. So it's important to remember that plants, they don't grow linearly. Their growth is really influenced by their environment. So for example, a lot of the cool season crops that we're growing right now, um, that we planted for our fall gardens, they're not going to be doing a whole lot of growth, especially with the 80 to 90-degree weather we've been having. So that's kind of outside their ideal range for air temperature. But as the temperatures start to kind of cool down in the coming weeks, their growth is going to start to increase a lot more. So I think it's really also important to kind of monitor the air temperature and soil temperatures within our garden site. So this is a little temperature data logger. I used a lot of these in my graduate research and I like them a lot. So I got some of my own personal ones, but this is pictures of my garden site where I hung one kind of at plant canopy temperature, plant canopy level, so I can measure the air temperature throughout the growing season, and then I have one buried a few inches into the soil, so I can have an idea of what's going on kind of at the root zone in terms of temperature. But a lot of home gardeners, they also might buy these types of soil thermometers that you can get at a garden center or online. So kind of now what you guys are probably most interested in, I want to talk about different types of season extension methods. So I'll cover four different options, but no, there's a lot of other options out there as well. So we're going to talk about cloche, cold frames, floating row covers, and low tunnels. And then I also indicated on here whether they would be good for home garden production, or if they would be more practical for small scale and commercial production, or if they're not practical at all. So let's first talk about cloches. These provide low, medium protection. Um, so cloche, if I believe I'm pronouncing that right, is a French term for kind of a bell. So early in the 19th century, these were these glass-shaped domes like pictured here. But today, a lot of these are more plastic versions that have ventilation available. So a lot of growers might do their own DIY versions, like these plastic soda liter bottles you see here. There's also milk jugs and wall of waters and other products. So the wall of water ones are interesting too because they're kind of more of a modern adaptation. So you actually fill it with water and kind of create that heating structure as well. In most cases, these can only really provide only a few degrees of protection, and they're mostly used in the springtime. And in terms of fall season extension, they may not be super practical just because the plants are getting to be too big. So trying to cover them with these different smaller products may not be super effective. But regardless, these are still an option, especially for small garden sites. So the next one I'll talk about is floating row covers. So sometimes these are also called frost blankets. So these can be a lightweight fabric. They're available in different thicknesses or grades, and they can provide anywhere from 2 to 10 degrees of protection. And typically farmers or gardeners will just lay these directly over their plants. And they can be supported by frames. But you always want to make sure to secure them down, especially in high wind areas with like soil, bricks, staples, or some other anchoring mechanisms. Floating row covers are great because they allow the air, water, and light to pass through. And they're, depending on the size of the farm, they can be easy to apply on at nighttime and then take off in the morning. So again, you might also see this method for early in the spring for frost and freeze protection as well. So the next one is cold frames. So cold frames, these can range from the small boxes to larger structures. They're usually built low to the ground and they have these removable or hinged lids, like here in the photograph I put. They're usually made from old windows or clear plastics like polycarbonate, polyethylene, or acrylic. Um, and they're usually the tops are angled towards the south to capture more sunlight. And there's a lot of guides and tutorials of how to build these yourselves too. You can build them from woods, bricks, or I've even seen cement ones as well. It's important to make sure that the lid is open during the day, especially at this time of year where it's really hot to allow for venting. But as the nights start to get colder too, these are great for that additional frost or freeze protection. So again, these are kind of like a older method. We don't really see a lot of cold frames around, but they're still a very practical method to use for season extension. So if you are interested in doing the fall, so once your summer stuff is done, you could remove all that and then get the fall stuff started. So the last one I just want to touch on is low tunnels. So this is honestly my favorite method for season extension. This is the one I've worked with the most. It can provide medium to high protection, usually about 2 to 4 degrees of protection when the temperatures get down to 24 to 28 degrees. And it can also help shield from snow. Um, so these are temporary structures. They're usually about only 4 feet tall. Depending on the size of your rows, you can make them about 3 to 6 feet wide. Typically, they're made from PVC, rebar, or metal conduit hoops. They're covered with fabric or greenhouse fabric or greenhouse plastic. So they can be really inexpensive to make. Know that the fabric can has a lot less heat retention, but it is a lot more breathable, whereas the plastic can provide more insulation, but will need a lot more ventilation as well. So you would have to lift the sides or the ends during the heat of the day. And you could even do a combination of both to provide that extra insulation. So here's some good photos of our research that we did on the USU research farm. So you can see these hoop structures out in the field, and then we're comparing the fabric material versus the plastic material here. And then you can even use these structures or different, here's some square shaped low tunnels that we used in the high tunnel. So we already had the protection of the high tunnel, and then we did these low tunnels inside there for kind of that double protection, if you will. So we have a lot of great different resources for season extension. These were some of the ones I referenced. The extending the garden season and then low tunnels for field cut flower production are both from Utah State University. And then I'm sure a lot of you guys have already read the vegetable gardening in South Dakota. So this is a great little guidebook on gardening all season long with all the information on different vegetable crops, their irrigation, fertility, and some pest management requirements. And then the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension has a fact sheet on fall vegetable gardens specifically that kind of goes more in depth on a lot of these principles. So just to kind of wrap up, if you guys do have any horticulture specialty crop production questions, totally feel free to reach out to me. I have my email listed here, then I have our office phone number here that you can reach me at too. But if a lot of you are in the greater Rapid City area, feel free to come by the West River Research and Extension Center here, and you can come see me in my office. And if you have questions, plant samples you want to bring in, um, it would be great to have you guys come visit. So that kind of wraps up my 20 minutes I have. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat.
So while I don't see any questions yet, but I do have a few questions for you from me.
Yeah,
So at the beginning, you mentioned that you have kind of done some with specialty crops. What are some of the specialty crops you have worked with? And then what are some of your favorites to work with?
yeah, great question. So in Utah, I worked a lot with our state's vegetable producers. So in Utah, there's a lot of commercial vegetable production, primarily onions, watermelon, other cucurbits. But then we're also kind of seeing a big rise of our more small and urban farms that have more of a diversity of crops. So I really enjoyed working with the brassicas, especially kind of on the IPM side of things too, just because our brassicas are really susceptible to a lot of different insect pests. So there was always kind of a need for different management strategies to work here. So here I was, you can see at a cabbage field, and we did a lot of kale trials too, looking at different management techniques and strategies that we were able to relay to our commercial growers in the state. And then a lot of my graduate research, I kind of switched over to cut flower production. So the two that I worked with were delphiniums and then larkspur. So these are two closely related cut flower species. They're really big, large, tall flowers. So they're really popular with florists for different events. And a lot of my research looked at kind of optimizing the production in both field production and high tunnels. Um, Looking at different fertility rates and planting date timing. So we were able to kind of get a lot of cool information and data from that research too that we're looking forward to publish. So here in South Dakota, I'm excited to work a lot with our specialty cut flower producers and vegetable producers too, to kind of work with them on just trialing different varieties and kind of optimizing a different production in terms of just fertility management too, and kind of seeing what kind of that season cut flower production and timing could look like here in the state. So lots of exciting possibilities.
Awesome. And what did you say was your favorite one to
Oh,
work with?
I didn't say. I I don't know. I think I'll say that's the delphinium because that was just kind of the main one I worked with, and I think I learned the most from that cultivar.
Awesome. Well, I will say that we are super, super excited to have you. Just all the new excitement and all the knowledge you bring to the horticulture team. We are so excited. Um, I also have a question. The temperature gauge that you were talking about that you use, is that electronic and or how do you read it? Is it like a manual one? And then how deep do you usually plant it?
Yeah, so these are the company's called HOBO, so hobo, and it's called a pendant. It's just a little, they're tiny little things. They have a battery in it, and you actually connect it via Bluetooth to your phone, so you're able to read it off an app. So the cool thing is about it is you can hang it up or bury it and leave it for several months. And then when you're ready to check it, you just kind of dig it up, and then you can connect it to the Bluetooth and then pull all the data. So right now I have mine set to collect the hourly temperature. You could also do it by the minute, or just the average daily temperature. But I think they're most effective if you check the hourly temperature too. So then I plan to leave mine kind of in there over the winter as well. Just because I think it's kind of cool to see what kind of the snow insulation can do for the bare soil, what the air temperature looks like. So when we did these with my research, we would have them in the high tunnel and field conditions, just to kind of compare over the season too. Um, just because I think the temperature is really interesting and it's kind of cool to correlate that with the plant growth. So if you're burying it in the soil, it's usually just kind of as deep as the plant roots are. So usually most garden vegetables are just going to be about 2 to 4 inches deep. So that's usually just the best depth to bury it at.
Okay. That's so cool. I've never heard of that before. Um, and then I have another question about the cloche,
Yeah.
the coverings. So I have one of my Uncle Verns. He had a garden at his church, and he would always put plastic bags around them, like he would stake it up. And I was like, "What are you doing that for?" And he said to keep out the rabbits. But I'm like, I wonder if, and I don't know if this would ever be a problem with these, but do you ever get um like it how it can like scorch the plant, or does it affect the plant's growth at all? Or
Yeah,
does it?
definitely. I think ventilation is absolutely critical with these things too, because it really is kind of almost like a tiny little greenhouse. And if you don't have any sort of ventilation, you definitely can cook the plants too. Which is why I think kind of they moved away kind of the old version glass ones to more of the plastic, like these soda bottles. Even the wall of waters, you're able to open up more to allow some of that heat. So especially early in the spring too, where the transplants are a lot more young, it's important to really monitor the temperature and be mindful about that. So
Yeah, I remember.
that could also add to kind of the labor intensity of using these as well.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago at McCrory, we just planted the tomato transplants, and then we were gonna get a freeze, like a surprise freeze in the middle of the night. So we had to go and wrap them so they would be protected and um, all that. So you can see where it definitely helps.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I still don't see any other questions. But if anyone has any more questions for Nick throughout, feel free to add them into the chat and he will be here for a little bit longer. So thank you, Nick. That was awesome and helpful.
Thank you.
And I'll get my slide up. All right, so hopefully everyone can see a picture of this butterfly on the coneflower. Um, I just had to add this picture. One day I was out having lunch at McCrory and I saw this butterfly. And normally, when I try to get pictures of butterflies, they always fly away from me. I'm not quick enough. But this one was just posing perfectly for me. And it's one of my current favorite pictures. And this Eastern tiger swallowtail is one of my favorite butterflies too. So I just had to throw that in there. But my name is Sydney Trio. I'm the education coordinator at McCrory Gardens and then SDSU Extension Horticulture Assistant. And tonight I'll be talking about some garden updates. So I have some plants that are currently blooming at McCrory Gardens, and then some common questions I've been getting on the garden hotline, and then some upcoming events that we have coming up. So first up, we have this partridge pea. We have it on both sides of our walkways, and once you walk down the middle of the sidewalk, you can just hear bees swarming in these flowers. The pollinators love it. It is a really good pollinator plant, just for bees, butterflies, but also birds. They like their seeds as well. And it is part of the Fabaceae family. So it is a legume and it is really good for fixing nitrogen in the soil. Really good native plant to add. And it doesn't get super tall, just a few feet tall. And it has pretty yellow flowers. The Liatris is just starting to open. Okay, I did lie. I was able to get another picture of a butterfly here. But thankfully I have my live on my camera so I can go back before it flew away. But those are just starting to open. And I'd say mid to late September, the butterflies are just swarming in these. You can just walk by and the butterflies will just fly everywhere. It's so pretty to see. And then Joe Pye weed is another good pollinator plant. The bees and butterflies love this one, and it is setting out their flowers, and this one can get pretty tall as well. And these two are really good native plants. This Lizzie Anthus is growing. This is a really good cut flower. This picture that I got, it looks a lot brighter than it is in person. This is the Roseanne Black Pearl. It's supposed to be a dark purple. It does look a little bit brighter in this one. And then we have a lime green variety as well. So those two colors together kind of look super pretty, but good in floral arrangements. And then we have this flowering tobacco in full bloom right now, and we have that in our hummingbird garden. This one, we just had this posted to our Facebook about what's growing on at McCrory Gardens, and it is the trumpet vine. It attracts a lot of pollinators, but primarily hummingbirds. And it's a woody vine that can spread aggressively sometimes. It can sucker out and grow in places you might not want it to grow. So you might not want to plant it near a house or building, but it does really good on a vine and attracts the pollinators. So, and it looks pretty too. And I would just like to say Dr. Ball just posted this on his tree pest alert that they're blooming throughout. So ironic timing. We both posted about this plant. This one, my fiance's aunt actually sent this. She was traveling in northern Nebraska, and I had never seen this before, so I had to look it up. And it is a prickly poppy, which I think is super cool. Reading more into it, it is a good pollinator plant, and um, the two positives is that it can absorb toxic substances, so like the herbicides, pesticides, and pollutants in the air, soil, water. But the two negatives are that it is poisonous if ingested, but mostly don't eat plants if you don't know. But it is a skin irritant for some people because it's so prickly. But it looks pretty cool. And it was a cool find. and it can be grown in South Dakota too. With that, if you ever see any cool plants and you're wondering what it is or what's wrong with my plant, we've gotten lots of questions about pumpkins, what's wrong with my lawn, and trees, lots of tree questions. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to the garden hotline at any of these numbers. We would be happy to help you. And then speaking of hotline, here are a few of the questions we have been getting, just to kind of show you what's all going on out there. But this one was sent in, and it is the bacterial speck on it. It is recommended to remove the infected leaves. It can happen when you have cold weather and rain, which we have been getting quite a bit of lately. So it's hard to stay away from this one, but just keep removing those leaves. In this case, this person had to remove the whole plant because it was all infected. And then I would recommend not planting tomatoes there in that same area next year. Next we had this person send in this picture of a bug, and they were wondering what this was, and it is a immature assassin bug, and Amanda advised us to for this person to release it back outside and so that it can continue eating other bugs. So if you've seen this around your house, that's what it is. We have also been getting some questions about trees that have this gummy, gooey substance on it, and it is gummosis. This one, in this case, is a cherry tree, and I think there's a few other trees that it affects, but it can come from a number of disorders and diseases, and there's no chemical control that Dr. Ball says. And he talks about it in his latest tree pest alert, but the best thing to do is to water when it is dry. I think there's been a few areas in the state, mostly in the central area, that has still been dry. I know East River has been getting lots and lots of rain, but still dry in the center part. Someone sent this. They saw this little black bug on their raspberries, and those are picnic beetles. And the best thing to do is to pick off the fruit and clean any materials that you use, like pruning, because they can feed off of the decayed fruit. So you want to pick all the fruit, even if it's already past being ripe or if they've fallen on the ground. So that's the best thing you can do to get rid of those for the next following year. This one is I actually sent this one in. I was golfing one day and I saw this. I was more focused on the plants. And I took this picture and I sent it into Cody, who you would have met last week, the new plant pathologist. And he said it is iris leaf spot caused by the fungus, which I cannot pronounce. But they are spread when splashing of mostly rain or overhead watering. So in this case, rain, and that it does overwinter on the dead leaves. So the best thing you want to do is to remove the leaves, and hopefully it won't come back next year. Some of you might be seeing these little beetles on your either roses, apple trees, some annuals they like to go after. They do have lots of host plants that they attack. These are Japanese beetles. They're tiny metallic little bugs. Uh, they are a pest, and they attack the foliage and the flowers of roses for the most part. And I've seen them on like cannas. They don't like marigolds, and some other annuals. So what we do at McCrory Gardens is we take a cup of soapy water and we go in the morning, not late or in the mid-afternoon because they're most active in the afternoon when it's the warmest. So go take a cup of soapy water in the morning and you just dunk them in there and then let that cup sit overnight and then you can dump it out. But that helps control them the best and kind of help reduce the numbers. Uh, there is some sites out there that say you can get these traps that kind of attract them, but it is not recommended to get those because those can attract in more Japanese beetles than you would want. So the best thing to do is to dunk them in soapy water and try and keep the populations low. Speaking of insects, we do have our annual insect festival. I believe this is our 8th annual. So we have that at McCrory Gardens coming up on September 6th. We talk about all the good and the bad. We do have interactive insect education, so we'll have a bunch of exhibitors. Amanda Bachman, the entomologist, will be there doing some monarch tagging. We have we'll have cockroach races, edible insects, photo contest. Dr. John Ball will be giving a tree/insect tour, and we do have a pollinator costume parade. So we are super excited to be having that. I can't believe it's already coming up in September. So that is one of our educational events. And then for entertainment, we do have Party on the Porch, which is every Sunday in September. So September 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, we have Party on the Porch. You can just come into the gardens, bring your lawn chairs, and listen to live music and grab a drink. So if you're around the area and want to visit, that would be one of those days would be great. And then more into October, we do have Fall Festival and our last Bloom and Grow workshop, which is going to be a bulb workshop. We're going to talk about different bulbs. And then Giggles and Ghouls. And then before we know it, it will be December and Christmas time, which is crazy. But yeah, we have all those dates on there. Coming up next Monday, we will have our rose trial night at McCrory Gardens. It is perfect for garden industry professionals, master gardeners, and home gardeners. Maybe you're wondering which rose variety is the best, which one smells the best, which one not to plant. So this is a good event if you're interested in roses. And yeah, Dr. Christine Lang will be the one kind of in charge of hosting this, and she has lots of great agendas on the topic, or she has a great agenda. And then lastly, if you are around the Huron area and going to be going to the state fair, we do have quite a bit of our extension speakers on the list to present. So I think they are updating the schedule now online. It might not be the most correct, but I would check again in the next few days to see the final schedule on there. And then we have our Master Gardener booth where the Master Gardeners will be there if you ever have any plant questions, want to grab some resources. That is a great place to check out. And with that, if you ever have any questions, here is my work cell number, and that is also the Brookings Garden Hotline number. And then you can also email me or visit me at McCrory Gardens. So with that, that is all that I have. Let's see, is there any questions?
Looks like there's one in the Q&A.
Okay. When was the rose thing at McCrory Gardens? That is next Monday. I think it's the 25th from 6:30 p.m. till 8 p.m. So if you want to come visit, there's no registration or RSV required. You just sign in when you get there. And yeah. And then someone said, I use a combination of soapy water and traps. The traps are 35 feet away from the garden. And in the first day, the bag was filled to a similar depth to rolls of quarters. After a week, it was like pork loin. I misplaced a trap from last fall and set it up, and it too filled a bag. My suspicion was that it gathered about an inch from the bottom of the bag. Hmm, that is interesting. You, Nick, have you ever um, seen the Japanese beetles in Utah at all?
No, I just have a question about that too. So Utah, very, very, very few reports. They always get eradicated when they do show up. So I'm like curious in South Dakota, kind of where's the most establishment? Is it like in the eastern part of the state? Do we see any reports of them farther out west, kind of into the Wyoming area?
Yeah, I know we've seen them a lot in the east side, and I know I've given some tours to some people from the middle of the state, and they don't have them. And I was like, knock on wood that you don't get them. So I think they're mostly on the east side.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool too. Maybe as gardeners as well, everyone to just kind of monitor their spread and kind of identify what the economic damage is, especially to like maybe cut flowers and other crops that we're seeing.
yes, definitely.
I was also curious, where was the tomato with the bacterial speck from?
That was from Sioux Falls,
Okay, cool.
so just south of here.
And then with the trumpet vines too, I think it is interesting that they recommend not to have it near homes or driveways, which makes a lot of sense too. Whenever I visit a lot of older homes in older neighborhoods that have the trumpet vines, I always think it really is cool that it's kind of on the house too, but I bet there is a lot of wear and tear. I know English ivy is kind of like that too, where it probably kind of degrodes the brick or siding of those homes.
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of an interesting and good recommendation for trumpet vines.
Yes. I was also reading in John Ball's Tree Pest Alert, and he made the comment about how don't plant it near your house unless you want to be able to climb onto the roof. So I thought that was funny too. Sweet. Well, I am curious if any of our participants have had any garden questions, if they've seen a lot of moisture, any diseases in their gardens, um, or if anything has happened.
So it looks like Michael just commented if there's any suggestions for managing leaf spot or something similar on cucumbers, pumpkins, or probably cucurbits and other, but not other vegetables.
Mm.
So I know that Dr. Tupanek in the department, he's doing a lot of research on cucurbit pathogens, specifically Alternaria, which is an example of leaf spots um, on cucumbers. So I can see if he has any resources or guides too. But I know Cody, our new horticultural pathologist, is working on some identification guides too on identifying leaf spots. Because the interesting thing is there's all the different host crops, there's a lot of different pathogens that can cause different types of leaf spots. So if we can know the correct way to identify them, we can also know the appropriate ways to manage them as well. Yeah, I found
Sweet.
that
Well, have
guide, so I'll post it in the chat.
awesome. Have you seen anything interesting these last few weeks? Any questions you've gotten?
Yeah, so we were down in the Hot Springs area last Friday. We were touring the community garden there. The Specialty Producers Association did a little field day where they were showcasing their wool mulch trial. So they had a plot of peppers and they were looking at bare soil versus wool cover versus wool pellets integrated into the soil. So they had a lot of kind of interesting results there. So I know they'll be sharing some of those results kind of in the upcoming weeks once they get all the harvest data. But The hot springs area too is kind of a unique kind of microclimate because it's so dry, they don't get a lot of moisture there. So that was kind of interesting too, just to see kind of how well the crops were growing, but also there was still some pest pressure too, but a lot of pollinators. So if you guys are in the hot springs area, I would definitely recommend visiting the community gardens there.
So, I see someone asked, is it normal for potato plants to die back now? And when can I harvest the potatoes? Um, I would say it is around that time, kind of late summer. They'll start to die back, and I would try digging one up to see how far along it is and see if the rest of them are ready.
Yeah, it is natural for the plant to kind of have some decline towards that end of the life stage. So that could be an indication of when the potatoes are ready to harvest. But like Sydney recommended, just kind of dig around and see kind of how big the tubers are and kind of or if they're close to that harvestable stage.
I know one year at McCrory we planted purple potatoes, and that was kind of fun. I also have purple carrots. See, you were probably moving when it was time to garden a lot, but do you have any plants at your place? Either if you have a yard or porch area?
Yeah, so we have a nice little garden bed in our house. So right when we moved in, it was perfect timing just to start a lot of these fall garden stuff that I talked about, which inspired my topic. So a lot of the great options are kind of short maturing plant or short maturing crop varieties. So like the beets, radishes grow super quick. I grew or sowed some carrots that we plan to overwinter just to give them some more time to become more sweet. And we did a lot of leafy greens too. But of course, the challenge, like I said, with planting right now is it's so hot. So we're out there watering at least twice a day just to kind of help keep them cool and alive until the cooler temperatures start to come. So
Yeah. Have you been getting a lot of rain West River?
yeah, definitely a lot of rain. A lot of longtime residents say it's definitely not normal where it's a lot more drier in this area, but this is kind of a anomaly year where we're getting all the moisture and storms. So
Yeah.
we
Hmm.
definitely feel like we had a lot more rain in Rapid City the past few weeks than a whole year in Utah.
Crazy. Well, I don't see any more questions. We might end a little early tonight. But thank you, Nick, for joining and introducing yourself. And we can't wait to hear more from you in the future and see what else you can share with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a great audience, and I'm excited to participate in more garden hours in the future.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you, everybody, and have a good rest of your night.